Hello and welcome to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. My name is Mehmet, and as you know, in this show, although it's called the CTO Show, but I like to bring tech and business together because we cover emerging technologies, we cover also startups, we cover entrepreneurship. And as you know by now, I have also with me sometimes guests, and today I'm very pleased to have with me Patrick joining me from the US today. Patrick, thank you very much for being with us on the show. If you can just tell us a little bit more about yourself. I know that you have a great story to tell us. So, brief about yourself and what you are up to.
Hey, Mehmet, it's good to be here today, and thanks for inviting me on your show. So I'm Patrick Noel Daly. I come originally from Ireland, and I guess to summarize my whole career, I started out very early with engineering and technical. My father had an engineering and technical business, so we were always around engineering. And that kind of set the seed, and also the business aspects and entrepreneurship was very, very important to us. So when we were growing up, we were always told, look, make something, do something, build something. And that stuck with me. When I was a young 14-year-old, I was working in a food van for my summer holiday, selling burgers and fries and on the beach in Southern Ireland to make some money. And I liked the whole idea of converting a product and making some money and having the fun of dealing with people. Maybe not always fun, but when people are hungry or hangry, whatever you want to say, it was a challenging place. Moving on, I started to travel when I was quite young. I was 18 years old, and I lived in Germany for 2 years. Um, Again, a kind of a last minute decision. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to travel, and I wanted to understand how other countries did things. I came back when I was 20, and I was working as a product manager for a while, and then I got a little bit impatient, and I wanted to do something extra. So I set up Autolink, which was a search engine for cars, to the right way or a faster way to find a car. A couple of years later, I went into medical devices and medical products and aerospace. We were developing products within my product manager role. We started out developing various products for medical, also developed various products for aerospace. So the engineering and technical aspect was very strong in my career at that stage. In 1999, after building another startup, I got the nice title in Ireland of National Young Entrepreneur of the Year. And I've always been, I guess, an entrepreneur. I didn't really realize it until I got titles like that was my profession. What I like to do now is, um, in the last 20 years, I've developed a few startups, but I've also innovated and developed and invented and patented some product technologies. And so then I went on. So right now, what I do is I develop products and license the products and technologies. But I also, in the last few years, started mentoring and supporting other entrepreneurs. And in that time frame, I wrote a book called Just Startup. It's a guide or pocket manual for entrepreneurs and people thinking of becoming an entrepreneur. Um, just to give them, I guess, the mistakes that I made particularly in the early years. I always thought I should put this into some form of educational format so that people can avoid the mistakes that I made. And if that helps people to get to success faster, then it's mission accomplished for me. So that's my general summary of career. There's many more, obviously, details and avenues that we can go down in terms of specifics, but that's the overall picture.
That's great, Patrick. Like how rich is your experience since your young age, I would say. So that's really inspiring. Now, being someone like, as I understood, you've been like a geeky guy, let's say, you're too much into technology, but at the same time, you had to shift into full fledged, I would say, business building startups. How was this experience? And, what are some of the insights you can give to people who maybe today they are in a pretty much technical role. They dream about having their own startup or business. So, what you can tell them about this move, and what are the things that they should take care about?
I'm glad you raised that point because I think it's For me, being strongly technical, I decided back when I wanted to go to college by night. I said to the managing director of the company that I worked with, I want to study marketing and business and law. And he said, well, why? And he said, we have a very engineering focus. Why would you put such effort into administration, business, and a kind of an MBA role, if you want to call it that, or an MBA education? And I said, because I can develop the products and I can innovate and I can invent and I can engineer. But if I don't know the structure of how to sell them, how to market them, how to pitch them, how to structure a business, then I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do to make the global picture a success. So he kind of took my response and said, "Yeah, I prefer." At the time, I was basically pitching for a fund to go to college, and that's the hard reality of it. I was looking at saying, "Okay, if they have a company fund that can pay for my education, then this is a good way to go." So when the managing director said, "I think you should study engineering and continue studying engineering and stay in this focus, and this is your wheelhouse, so stay here." But I said, "No, I need to understand the other elements of how to build this business." So I self-funded that degree because I knew that I would need to understand the mechanics of the business and the commercialization aspect. Having said that, I think the commercialization part, frankly, a lot of it is common sense. You need to just keep the common sense factor. That's the first thing I would say. The second point is people shouldn't be terrified or shouldn't be afraid of the sales aspect, because people that I've spoken with have always said, particularly if they're in scientific or technical roles or engineering roles, they kind of say, well, I'm not a salesperson. And my response is, do you know your product? Do you know a product or service that you're offering? Do you believe in it? Do you believe it adds value? Can you convince yourself that it does exactly that? And if you can convince others. Because sales is not something mystical or magical. Sales is convincing other people that you've got a service or product to offer that adds value for them. Um, and when you put it into that kind of like simplistic form or simplistic terminology, then the commercialization part is not so difficult. Where it is difficult is when you get into the competitive framework and then you go into the strategic framework and you go funding the business and stuff like that. And I needed to understand that. Now I picked some of it up through the engineer or the business degree and the let's say the MBA, but really until you get on the ground, you don't know how to you don't know how it's going to roll until you're on the ground. And what I do now is I mentor, I advise, I consult with some companies, I mentor and advise some entrepreneurs. That's a free of charge pro bono give back exercise on my part, particularly if the entrepreneur is starting out and doesn't know the road ahead. Um, I didn't have that when I started out, and I wish I did. So what I'm doing now is filling that gap. But overall, I would say, if you're technical, if you've got a technical orientation, don't be scared of the commercialization aspect. Just bring the right people around you if you have gaps in what you see as your, um, let's say, not so strong point.
You covered multiple points, and like you once you mentioned these points, I had immediately here because I think they are worth to discuss with you, Patrick. The
Mm,
first one, you touched base on something very important, which is, I think, not only you, myself, also coming from a technical degree background. Now, don't you think that we have a problem when it comes to the curriculum of engineering degrees? Or I think it starts all with schools, because business topics are not covered. At least now I started to see some shift, but it's very shy, I would say. Don't you think that we have some issues in education?
absolutely. And I think what I'm doing at the moment is building what I see is, and what I term right now as entrepreneurship academies. We need to get people thinking at a very young age about entrepreneurship as a profession. Um, yes, it's good to have the engineering degree or the science degree or the technical degree. Um, but there also needs to be a module or an element. And I completely appreciate your point, because education has to say entrepreneurship is this piece. This is how you make a business. This is how you build a business. This is how you make a business. This is how you scale a business, as well as the engineering and technical degrees. So the STEM, let's call it, aspect, and that whole scientific, technical, engineering area, we need that, obviously, but we need to get the people studying that or experienced in that, focusing on the business aspect as well. And how do I make this product or service into a major success? So yes, you're right. The engineer or the education system needs to take that as a, a concrete part of an overall degree or an overall education.
Great, great point. Now, the second thing that you mentioned, which also resonated with me when you said, like, people should not be shy of being into sales or promote their products. Now, what do you think? There is still, unfortunately, and I see it a lot, uh, this shady image of someone whose title starts with sales, whatever
Yes.
comes later. Why do you think we still have this issue? Because if you think about it, if you recommend a movie to your friend, actually you are selling them something, right? If you are telling
100%.
your friend or some family members, go to this restaurant, you are selling them something. But why do you think when it comes to business, we have this still shady, I'm calling it, um, or if you want to say, like no, I don't want to be the sales guy. By the way, I
Yeah.
was like this before until I figured it out, and like I went all over a totally sales role. But what do you think the main reason is still sometimes people are afraid to be called sales, or they feel shy of being selling something?
Yeah. And it's something that's bred into our brains, really. It's something that's engineered into our brains because I put a post on LinkedIn actually a few weeks ago and it says, selling is a necessity and not a nuisance, because every minute of every day, we are actually selling a message. Selling, uh, we're selling something. So it's a given in life that we have to sell. Now, it's the word sales that causes this negative connotation. And that's a pity because the perception is that sales is this person trying to give you to push some product on you that you don't want. But like the fact is, you only buy what you want and need. So getting offers is an everyday part of life. So we shouldn't categorize it as this kind of like, oh God, I don't want to be in sales. Everybody's in sales. It's human nature. It's the way we operate. We've got to be in sales. And when we change that mindset, I think life will be an awful lot easier for us because, like I said, we're able to discern and make a distinction between what we want and what we don't want. Um, I think in that entrepreneurship training piece, let's say, or academic part, one of the things that I want to do in my entrepreneurship academies is to train that, just to say, look, sales is not a dirty word. Sales is a word that is necessary. It's a necessity, not a nuisance. And get that mentality moving. And I think that's again maybe down to education. It's initially academic education, but it's also social education. That it's not somebody trying to hustle you into doing something, to buying something that you don't want. We all have the ability to make a decision, but getting offers is a good thing, I think.
If you allow me, Patrick, to add something, and this is, from watching the market, some experience, stories from the field. The other thing I believe, which makes people little bit want to be far away from that, is unfortunately, and this is would lead me to another question. Like, of course, you get a product, you got a service, you need to sell it. That's fine, completely fine. But don't you think that sometimes the pressure that people who works in a sales role, especially for tech companies, and recently we are seeing this more and more, people trying to, like, overcomplicate things, right? From a sales perspective, while the product is very straightforward. the pain that it solve. It's very straightforward. But you get, these ARR, MRR, and all these metrics. So salespeople, they get so pushy, right? And
Yeah.
then when people see this behavior from people who are under pressure, they do this. So now the question is, as a founder, right? Of course, maybe especially if I have raised some funds, the investors should be happy because this is why they have put trust in me as a founder and they give me money to grow this. But how I can do this balance between growing the business, but at the
Mhm.
same time, not showing my salespeople like, they are just after taking an order and, being the traditional point of view of a sales guy. How we can, in your opinion, with your experience, Patrick, get something in the middle where we can grow the business while keep the
Mhm.
sales the way that you just described?
I think the fundamental point is marketing, proper marketing. It's like marketing 101, the baseline of marketing, which is you prospect the customers that you believe will buy your product. Because we'd spend so much time and energy in pitching to the wrong people. In the first phase of your business, you said, this is my product or service. Who's the likely customer? I wrote in the book about this, the Just Startup book that I wrote over a year ago. And I talked about the focus group aspect of testing your market. So if you believe you have a product that is suitable for, let's say, the medical fraternity, let's say it's a product that you're going to sell to doctors, test
Hmm.
that, test that theory, pitch your products to 4 or 5 doctors, 2 or 3 doctors that you trust, that you believe will give you a valid opinion. And if you're on the right road, then your sales job is going to be much easier. You're not going to be wasting time. You're not going to be wasting your time or the prospect's time. You're not going to be knocking on the wrong doors. Because if investors have given you money to grow your business, you don't want to waste their money. You want to get every pound of let's say, effectiveness from that money. And by funneling down to your target markets and knowing that your target markets are valid before you hit the gas, before you hit the big like sales campaign, then your sales effectiveness is going to be much, much easier. And then there is no nuisance because you're not pitching this to the wrong people and you're not knocking on the wrong doors, as it were, as far as the customer target is concerned. So I can't stress that strongly enough. Find your customer, know your customer, pitch to your customer initially as a test, especially if you're a new startup, and validate your assumptions. If you do that, the sales channel is going to be much happier, much easier, much more effective with better results.
And I think, Patrick, this would apply whether it's a B2B product or whether it's a
Doesn't matter.
B2C product, right?
Everything, everything. It's the
Yeah.
same. You don't waste your time and money pitching to the wrong people, but test your theory, test your strategy. And this is maybe where the business planning aspect of things comes in as well. Because the enthusiasm of the entrepreneurial mindset, even if you're, let's say, not a traditional entrepreneur, let's say you're an engineer, you're a scientist, and you have a product to pitch, your enthusiasm well is high. You know, you want to get out there, you want to tell people about your product, you want to let the world know what you've developed and invented. But in reality, it's much more effective if you choose your market carefully, validate that market, and you may go out and say, okay, this is my pitch. This is what I've got to sell. Your first test marketing exercise may yield great results, which is this is not your market. Maybe you need to move to the left. Maybe you need to move to the right. Maybe you need to tweak what you've got to make it more effective for the individual markets that you need. That effectiveness in the equation means that the sales job is less of a nuisance, or let's say less of a less of less of seen as somebody trying to sell something square peg round hole scenario. You know, it needs to be, if you can find that fit initially, then you've just enhanced your chances of success significantly.
So start with proper marketing and testing. Now,
Proper
talking,
marketing system. Yeah.
yeah, so talking about testing, and I'm asking here not only about from the marketing aspect. Um, I still see sometimes this happens a lot where founders, they get so emotional around the idea that
Mhm.
they don't test it enough and they get stuck, you know, and then it takes so long before they figure out like, okay, we should have pivoted, right? So
Mhm.
from your experience and after all, the years that you have spent in entrepreneurship and startups, and you've mentoring, you wrote a book about that. What advice you give to founders, and what are the signs that they have, you know, once they start to get it, they should say, okay, guys, like if they have multiple founders, guys, we think we should pivot, right?
Yeah.
So, what you can tell us and fellow founders about this point?
Get one or two advisors or mentors that will give you valid advice and give you valid information that you listen to. Because you're right, Mehmet. What happens is the entrepreneur or the business founder goes out thinking, this is the best product in this space ever. Nobody else has done anything like this. And then you pitch, and let's say you do your test marketing. In some cases, actually in quite a few cases, unless you're willing to listen to the feedback and use it, then you will, in some cases, just go straight down the road and keep going and think, okay, I'm going to just forget about that negative comment. And I believe in it anyway myself. So I'm going to keep going. If you have a secondary advisor that you trust and that you know is going to give you real, straight down the line advice, that's important from the entrepreneurial development perspective, from the person development perspective. Because as entrepreneurs, as founders, as promoters, we're very enthusiastic people. And if we hear negative comments, sometimes we just brush them over or brush them away and say, I don't want to hear anything negative. This is not the case. This is my product. And then you push back. But if you have a secondary advisor that's either a mentor, an advisor, could be a family member that you know will give you straight, direct feedback, then that can save you a fortune. It can save you a lot of time, money, effort, and it can maybe help you to prevent having a not successful company. I don't like the word failure. I never use failure in my vocabulary. It doesn't work.
Same here.
But if you don't, it can enhance your chances of success if in the initial stages you open your mind enough to take valid advice from at least one reliable and trusted advisor. That can save you a lot of time and money.
And I mentioned, I think, on a couple of episodes, like there's nothing wrong. And actually, when you pivot, it might turn out to be the biggest thing that you,
Absolutely.
you you have came up with. And there are a lot of
Mhm.
examples. I remember now Slack is one of them. It was supposed to be something else before it comes to the platform it is today. Now, this is also a traditional question, sometime asking, but I like to take different opinions. Now, it's not a debate, but it's like schools or mentality about should we bootstrap or should we raise funds? When is it good to bootstrap? When is it good to raise funds?
It's a huge question in one sense, it depends on the product or service that you're offering, in my view. In my opinion, if you have something that you can bootstrap, which can take a slower burn or a slower build, it's better to bootstrap in the initial stages at least, as long as you can afford it. Just make sure that you can keep you can pay your bills, both on a personal level and a business level. Um, if you need to have investment, then the reason I say bootstrap is if you hold equity and you don't go to the funding pool in the initial stages, then you're adding value to your enterprise, adding value to your business. So your negotiation power and your ability to retain as much equity as possible is enhanced. However, if you have a product or service that you think can be very, very big very quickly, then bootstrapping doesn't, in my view, apply. You need to put fuel in the tanks. You need to fuel that up fully. Um, there's a whole different discussion that we can have around funding and the structure and the strategic aspects of funding. Um, and in that sense, but to answer your question, I would say bootstrapping is appropriate for some businesses. It's not for others. And I don't want to be vague about that, but it's
Yeah.
very much business and product dependent.
Is it like a fair point to say, like, up to a certain level? Let's say, like, I'm up to a certain where I have, let's say, an MVP. Maybe it's a
Mm.
good idea to be bootstrap. And once I have an MVP and, like I have, I figured out that there's a demand, there's a high probability of having a product market fit. then it is the time to go and seek funds. Can we put it in this context, Patrick?
You could, but again, it's product dependent. For me, I would say probably at least half of the products that I've developed, I've done on the bootstrap basis. You know, that I would fund it myself and I would bring it to an MVP level, um, put it in front of a focus group or your selection of test marketing customers, and validate it. If you validate it, your plan is much more real. Because I think the venture capital community, and no, actually, I'm going to say that the venture capital community and the investor community get pitches in the hundreds every day. You know,
Right.
the more validity and the more you can validate your product or service before going to those people, the more likely it is that you're going to get funds. If you go in with just an idea, and this is a great concept, I'm going to take over the world with this. They hear that too much, you know, in my view. I get pitches every day and I look at it and I say, well, have you validated this? Where's the validation? Have you talked to customers? Do you have any kind of revenues? You know, have you made one sale? These fundamentally basic elements of business. Because what happened probably even up to just a few years ago, you know, these crazy valuations were coming out for companies that were pre-revenue. They didn't even have a sale and they were getting like massive valuations. And
Just pitch decks, right?
yeah, you get a pitch deck and somebody saying my business, I have no sales, but my business is worth 100 million. You know, what kind of, who makes that? Who would pay it? And, but this was happening because I think this hysteria was happening where people were like running after the businesses because popular, let's say within that segment, the popular view was, oh, this is going to be huge. This is going to be a big thing. And they got these inflated valuations. And then reality came into the market.
Yeah.
I'm very much what I call a bread and butter business type. You know, I look at it and say, does it have sales? Is the product validated? You know, you can tell me you're going to take over the world with this product and in this segment, but until I see some validation from people who are willing to give you their hard earned money, you know, you don't
Yeah.
have ultimate validation.
I've seen this, Patrick, honestly, and like especially when the Uber, were something new, the Airbnb and these kinds of, like that shift in startups. Uh, we used to hear about local startups, like taking the idea and making it more local, for example, for a certain geography. I
Mm,
was kind of understanding because as idea itself, it was validated somewhere, and of course they have, the same problems because, like hair riding, right? So hair riding is a problem everywhere. So if I do an application for sorting this problem in my country or let's say in my region, that makes sense. But I've seen, yeah, as you said, like people who, uh, and unfortunately, I'm seeing this. Flood, I get the same as you, although like I'm not a VC yet. Hopefully, I will be one day.
mm,
But I receive like weekly 3 to 4 proposals. For example, we are the Web3 startup that we are.
exactly.
Okay, okay. Tell me more. What's like the first thing for me, Patrick, and I think you will agree with me. The first thing I ask, what problem are you solving, right?
Yes.
So this is number one. And second, whose problem is that? So who's your target customer? Um, yeah, so very valid points you mentioned. Now I want to take you back in time.
Okay.
And while I was doing the research, it's interesting. So you started this automobile search engine, Autolink,
Mm,
and
yeah.
then I was reading that then Google came. What was
Yeah.
your feeling? Like, did you wish that if you had came up with this idea before, or did you
Yeah.
say, okay, I wish that Google can buy my company? Like, what was your feeling at that time?
Yeah. When I came up with the idea, first of all, it was very much early stages, you know, like the word search engine wasn't even around. I called it a search and find program when I came up with the idea. And I got a guy that was in computer science to write this program for me, and we put it into action. And after 12 months, that was 90. So I think Google came out in 98. That was 1997. And I was just a young entrepreneur with full of energy, wanted to get this done. But I was working by day and I was going to college by night for a number of years in that time frame. So my day would start at like 6 a.m., into work at 7, finish at 4 o'clock, jump into my sales suit, let's say, go to the customers, which were like car dealerships, premium car dealerships in the region, sell my advertising service, as I called it at that time. jump into college from 7 o'clock and finish at 10 and be home by 11. So like, I looked at what I had and I said, I'm not giving up my college or university track. I need to pay my bills, so I need a daytime job. The business in the middle was making some additional revenue. So I had to make a call. And the call was, you know what? I'm going to stick with the outer two and the business, I'll just park. Now, when I said previously that I learned lessons, one of the lessons that I learned was I should have kept that business because it would have been, it was pre Google and it would have been a Google. You know, I know it would have spun out. I know we would have had many elements to it. But how do I look at that, Mehmet? I look at it and say that was learning. I don't regret the decision that I made. I look at it and I say, I learned from that. I made some money from it. Um, and I got a kind of like a satisfying feeling that I came up with the concept and that it rubber stamped my ability to do that. And a lot of that is confidence. People go, oh, God, why didn't I keep that? And I should have kept it. And if I kept it, and then they go around, they eat their own confidence by being negative. I'm always positive about experiences. Take every positive element you can from your experience because experience is value. And I'm sure that in the coming few years, something will come back and reward me for that thinking in the sense that I may get into something similar. I may have something that is again radically new, but next time I won't close it down or I won't, I'll keep it. Um, so, but yeah, I could have been bought out, but at that stage, if I really look at it holistically, I was probably too young to get a very big check at that stage. Because if I had sold the company at that stage, then I wouldn't have had that type of experience. I was super like early in my career. And if I got a massive check from somebody like Google for my business, then maybe I'd be drinking cocktails on a beach somewhere instead of building businesses and writing books.
Yeah, exactly. But I like one thing, about the positive side, and for me also, uh, the four letters FAIL. I don't like even to spell; they don't exist in my
Mhm.
dictionary. I call it learning because like if you don't, do mistakes, you would not learn. I would say. Now, the reason I brought you back there because there's always also in the startup world this discussion, or let's say this argument between two schools. So the school that says, okay, the 0 to 1 school, right? Like,
Mhm.
go big and do everything and be a the famous book by Peter, and the other one which say, okay, like be niche, you'll still do good, like you might be able to have your niche, have your steady income, and keep it like this. Okay, maybe if one day the market becomes obsolete, that's fine, you would jump to another one, or as this is why I ask you, maybe like a someone who became like the one from the zero will come and buy you. How do you see this, Patrick, after all these years in entrepreneurship?
I think what needs to happen is, irrespective of whether you believe you have a very big business or not, you still need to do the first steps. You need to get your foundation stones correct. Um, the reasons, in my view, and in my experience, businesses fall down because foundation stones aren't good. They're not solid. So put your foundation stones in place, irrespective of whether you think you have a niche business or whether you have something that is the new Apple. You need to fundamentally put the structures in place so that, let's compare it to a house or a building. If the foundation isn't good, the house won't stay up.
Yeah,
And that's the way I look at businesses as well. In the first stages, you've got to do an awful lot of time, put an awful lot of time and effort into planning, into looking at this, into analyzing it, and objectively analyze what you're looking at. That's why I said advisors, mentors, people around you that have been through this process. Run it by them and take their opinions. And if they say, go for it, full steam ahead, let's go, then that's a validation. If they say, tweak it, go a little bit left, go a little bit right, modify, maneuver, take that on board, discuss it. You obviously have to discuss it. It's everything is like, a decision making process. If their view is, don't do that because you're probably going to waste the advice is, don't do this because you're probably going to waste time, energy, and money. Um, then you need to take that into account as well. But I think fundamentally what you need to do in the initial stages of your business is take time to understand what your foundation stones are. And then once you build on those foundation stones, you're good. Whether you're going to be a $1 million company or a $1 billion company, you need to do in my view, you need to do the same thing.
So foundations, it's like the points, just to recap the points you mentioned. You have the idea, you have validated it, you know that you have a product market fit, right?
Yeah.
And of course,
Absolutely.
you have the business model, you know how you're gonna generate revenue.
And you have to be able to fund your business. Don't underfund your business ever, because if you underfund, you're going to be constantly running on empty, and you're going to be constantly under stress and pressure. So you look at it and say, do I bootstrap? And if we bootstrap, can we generate profitable sales? When can we get to profitable sales?
Yeah,
Because for me, again, like I said, I'm kind of very, very much a bread and butter business guy, which is get profitable sales as quickly as possible, because your reliance on funding goes way down and your independence goes way up and the strength of your business goes up. So many businesses that I've seen, particularly in the last, let's say, 10 years, they go out thinking, we don't have to be profitable for at least 5 years. I think that's, they won't put a time frame on it, but it's not a bad thing to be loss making. I believe that's their perception. I believe that's wrong. I believe the attitude has to be get to profitable sales as quickly as possible while scaling our business. Now, there are many factors in that equation, which is your funding mix. So if you say, I want to be at profitable sales faster, you need more funding to get to that point in the initial stages to allow you to get to profitable sales. If you're bootstrapping, then you need to maybe stay smaller. But again, it's very much business and product and service dependent.
thank you very much for being with us today, Patrick. I really enjoyed the discussion. As usual, for people who are watching this on YouTube, if you have any questions or feedback, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I will be more than happy to get to you. And if also you want to subscribe, please don't forget to do so. You can subscribe also on your favorite podcasting platform. And as usual, if you are also interested to become a guest on the show, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. I will be more than happy. You can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter, and you can drop me an email also as well. And as usual, until we meet in the next episode, thank you very much, and we'll meet you soon. Thank you.